Of all the figurative language devices, simile is probably the easiest to spot, but it's one that often doesn't get addressed very well in an analytical sense, and often in writing students don't always make the full use of what a simile can do for them. So I just want to give you a bit of a guide on some good examples of simile use, some bad examples of simile use, and to hopefully give you a bit of a starting point for thinking outside the obvious when it comes to looking at similes. And I'd like to start by drawing your attention to a simple definition for simile, one that you were probably taught many years ago. But a simile is a comparison using the words like or as. That's a really straightforward one. Everyone finds it easy to locate similes. The challenge comes with analysing them or to construct interesting similes. So just to begin with, let's look at an example of a simile from literature. This is from the English Patient. Moments before sleep are when she feels most alive, leaping across fragments of the day, bringing each moment into the bed with her like a child with schoolbooks and pencils. So this simile, this like a child with schoolbooks and pencils, is a quite simple and straightforward one. It captures, I guess, the childishness, the innocence with which this character is approaching how she reflects on the day. There is a dedication of a child with school books, but there's a lightness, a playfulness about it. Now, if we look at one going back to Dickens, we see a simile that's used to capture something that is, I guess, impossible to describe in words. When I laid down the paper, I was aware of a flash, rush, flow. I do not know what to call it. No word I can find is satisfactorily descriptive, in which I seem to see that bedroom passing through my room like a picture impossibly painted on a running river. This is an example for me of how similes can be used to capture what can otherwise be near on impossible to describe in conventional terms. In this gap between the comparison of what's going through this character's memory and creating an image to help the reader make sense of that, we see the richness of figurative language and what language can do to construct things that are impossible to describe. So I've given you two examples here of literary uses of simile. I'd like to draw your attention here to some not so elegant uses of simile, but to use this as a warning about how similes can be used poorly, but also in showing you these examples here, it can highlight to you that in your own writing you can use simile in really interesting ways. But let's look at these here as bits of caution. Her eyes were like two brown circles with big black dots in the centre. Well, to be like two brown circles, big black dots in the centre, well, that's what eyes are, isn't it? He was as tall as a 6'3" tree. We can see the obvious problems there. Her face was a perfect oval, like a circle that had its two sides gently compressed by a thigh master. You know, of the three, I think that one is actually quite amusing, and it could be used in writing, in a written piece, in an interesting way, in a funny way. But I'm drawing these three here to your attention just to show you some common errors or some common weaknesses, how similes are used by many students who don't quite grasp how, or don't quite get the full measure of what a simile can do and how a simile can enrich the language of a text. And so the next one I'm going to show you on the next slide here is, for me, I think one of the greatest literary similes I've ever come across. Now, we can't all be T.S. Eliot, but we can try and, I guess, steal like artists. Here we have the opening from the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. This simile here draws attention to what I was saying earlier, that what we'd like to have in an effective use of simile is an unexpected, an unconventional comparison. This comparing that way the evening is spread out against the sky, we're expecting this next line to be something gentle, something romantic even, but we have a patient etherized on a table. And it's in that gap that the richness in this lies. And so when we're writing and using similes, we want to try and make a comparison that's unusual, unexpected for the reader. It could be funny, it could be dramatic, it could be just to capture something that would otherwise be impossible to describe. But also when we're analysing on the other end, when we're critiquing literary texts, we're looking for uses of simile that create unusual comparisons. And in looking for what's in between the object and the comparison, or the moment and the comparison, and to see within that gap the layers of meaning that emerge from that. So simile is one of the most straightforward and simple of the figurative language devices, but you can see here 3 examples of how it can be used powerfully. So don't underestimate the simile, both as a writer and as a critic.